to me that I look at and say that dude is going to command a roster spot.
Yeah, right. I think that is exactly how I'd frame it as well, right? The seventh wide receiver would come down to, first of all, this guy would have to outwork everybody else on this roster to be worthy of that seventh spot, which is what Xavier Restrepo is already going to have to do, right? He's going to start out with the 2s and 3s. He's going to start out catching balls from Will Levis, Tim Boyle, and Brandon Allen. If he can elevate himself to start getting more of that upper 2 level where they mix in with Cam again, that's where your conversation is the connection between Cam Ward and Restrepo worth keeping that 7th receiver? And I wrote last week about Xavier Restrepo and what that connection really means, right? It's not something that we see very often, although we've seen it very recently a lot. And it's something that when you talk about it, like, oh, we need to keep him on the roster because of this connection with Cam. What does that exactly mean, right? And so I took a deep dive into what exactly Xavier Restrepo's realistic results could look like in 2025. And you look at some of the guys who have reunited in the NFL, right? Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. I know Cam was the number 1 pick, just like Joe Burrow, but certainly not the same level of caliber of player coming out as they were, right? Jamar Chase, infinitely better wide receiver than Xavier Restrepo. I think that's fair to say. Jalen Hurts, Devonta Smith also combined. Chase and Burrow at LSU combined for over 2,000 yards, 23 touchdowns. And over the last 4 years have connected for over 5,000 yards, right? So that has paid dividends, although I would argue that both those guys would be doing what they do with whatever team that they ended up with. Jalen Hurts and Devonta Smith, both top 50 picks or just outside the 50th pick. Hurts, second rounder, 53rd overall. Devonta Smith, top 10 pick in 20 and 21. They didn't play much together at Alabama, just 125 yards and a touchdown. However, over 4 seasons, 4,300 yards. That connection has continued to work very well. Go back to when Devontae Adams went to, Las Vegas with Derek Carr. That duo back in 2012 and 2013 put up 3,000 yards, 39 touchdowns. When he came to the Raiders, he put up 1,500 yards and 14 touchdowns, something that he was at the back end with Rodgers not really doing, right? And so that connection kind of revitalized that. And when Derek Carr left, you saw Devontae Adams essentially won out. So that connection absolutely mattered in Las Vegas.
Sure.
Look at some of the other ones. Kyler Murray, Marquise Brown, put up 1,400 yards and 11 touchdowns in their college career together. More or less not great, but that had to do with injuries. Put up just over 600 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 60 receptions, but did not play a lot of games. They played 13 games over 2 seasons combined. So that's one that's tough. And then, of course, Tua and Jalen Waddle, right? Yet again, all these guys that we're talking about, top first or second round picks, most of them being top 10 picks. Certainly not what Xavier Restrepo is. Certainly what we don't know what Cam Ward is yet, right? And so Tua and Waddle, 700 plus yards, 7 touchdowns in their 4-year career together, over 3,300 yards, but 3,300 of Waddle's 4,200 total yards. So about 1,000 yards in there from Skylar Thompsons of the world and things like that. And so I don't think that connection really matters for Xavier Restrepo and Cam Ward, really, right? It's certainly not enough to make it the reason you're keeping this guy as a 7th receiver, right? He has to provide something else, because if you're keeping him just for that connection, there's a very similar connection or duo from college that reunited just last year in Bo Nix and Troy Franklin. I mean, the two put up very similar numbers to what Cam Ward and Xavier Restrepo put up in college. Bo Nix and Franklin had 81 receptions on 114 targets for 1,300 yards and 14 touchdowns in college. You got to the NFL last year. Troy Franklin had 30 receptions on 52 targets, 300 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And I think that's the ceiling of what Xavier Restrepo's production could be at the NFL level if he were to. So that all of this to say, right? Because once again, Troy Franklin also was drafted in the 4th round. Certainly not Xavier Restrepo, UDFA. And so I'm not saying it's impossible that he makes the roster, right? He's going to have to put in a lot of work. But that work's going to have to come on special teams. He's going to have to do something other than play the slot position worthy of being slot 2 on this team, right? He's going to have to contribute somewhere else, because if you're looking at the realistic production of these type of connections, you're looking at Troy Franklin's 300 yards and maybe 2 to 3 touchdowns.